Our next storyteller is, let's ask Susan Epstein if she's ready. I'm going to talk about Susan a little bit. She's a woman that broke the glass ceiling for so many women sailors in a big way. She was just so talented with her sailing that she knocked down doors and kicked open all kinds of opportunities for all of us. And we owe her a debt of gratitude. She is the past chair for the Sailing Council Association and past chair of U.S. Women's Match Racing Championship at U.S. Sailing. And she's also on our board of directors. She became a member of NWSA in 2001, and she's just an amazing woman. Susan, I don't think she'd mind me saying she is not a spring chicken anymore. She is something else. So Susan, are you ready for telling your story?
I guess I am.
Thank you.
I guess when you've been sailing as long as I've been sailing, you've got an awful lot of stories to tell. But I'm going to tell you the beginning story, the introduction to my 76 years of racing sailboats. I was 7 years old. I was standing on the end of a pier, a dock, and I didn't have a life jacket on. And I was thinking, if Mom sees me out here, she'll kill me. And along came Annie Fulton in Lawley 15, which was the boat that the juniors sailed back then. The juniors being 10, 12-year-olds. And she came by. She was one of my older brother's girlfriends. She must have been 14 or 15 years old, and I was 7. She said, "Susan, will you crew for me?" And I said, "Annie, I don't know how to crew." And she said, "Oh, I'll tell you what to do." She said, "I'll tell you what ropes to pull. Just listen to me." So I sailed with Annie that day, and that was my first sailboat race. I sailed in a couple of more in the next couple of years. But 2 years later, and that was 1944. In 1946, 2 years later, my dad bought that very boat, Lawley 15 L6, for me. And I will never forget standing next to the boat in the yard and my father pointing at the boat and saying to me, "Now you listen, this is your boat and you take care of it." And he expected me to do everything on my boat that my brothers did on their 110s. So thank you, Dad, because you let me know that I wasn't so special because I was a girl. I could do everything the boys did. And that was probably the start of my being so damn what Debbie described me as. I was a very good sailor. I was intelligent. That 369, the blue boat, was my 210. But between the Lawley and the 210, I also had a 110 and an Ensign. And for my 60th birthday, my gift was 210 number 460. I was the by the way, this is me hanging out on a 110. I was close to 50 years old in that picture, but anyhow, one of the best things sailing did for me, I was working at a small startup company in Cambridge, controls for radiation, and I was living in an apartment in Boston. It was my first summer away from the shore and all of our boats. And it was a very hot spring. I joined community boating on the Charles River so I could go sailing. and I was at lunch with some of my colleagues and was talking about how hot it was, and a great way to cool off was to go sailing on the river. And I said to my coworkers, hey, anybody want to go sailing tonight? Let me know. One person stopped by my lab desk and said, did you mean what you said? And I said, about what? He said, going sailing. I said, yeah, if you want to go, meet me down, at community boating. And he showed up, and 3.5 weeks later, I had an engagement ring on my finger. And the long and the short of it was, 60 years ago, almost 61 years ago, this non-sailor that I took sailing on the Charles River became my husband. And, oh, there's the Charles River. And anyhow, I've done a lot of sailing then, and I've been very involved in the administrative end of the sport. I taught at Wheaton College in the chemistry department, but while I was there, I also taught sailing in the athletic department. And while I was there, I asked if, in one of my classes, if anybody sailed. And I decided it was time to start a sailing team at the club and at the college. And we ended up with a sailing team. I wrote a proposal for a bunch of boats. And Wheaton at the time, by the way, was an all-women's college. And so I got a lot of young women into the sport, too. So I, as a woman in my generation, enjoyed sailing so much that I thought it was only right that I brought as many other women into the sport as I could. I served on the board of U.S. Sailing, which is the national governing body of the sport in this country, as you probably all know. And that was a great experience for me. And right now they have, I think Corey is their second female president. So sailing and women have come a long way since I first went sailing with Annie Fulton. And my oldest daughter, Linda, all my kids know how to sail. There's 5 of them. But my oldest daughter, Linda, became a world-class sailor. She still sails and loves it. And I think that my intro to sailing, it should stop because I can't go on for 76 more years. And that, I think, is my story. There were a couple of glass ceilings I had to break, but one more thing. I remember going to a regatta, trailing my boat out to a regatta in the Midwest. I think it was Milwaukee, actually. And the women at the yacht club were so excited. They called me the girl from the East because female skippers with male crew weren't quite what they were accustomed to, although there were 1 or 2 out there, but not a lot. So I was, I was kind of surprised.
Well, Susan, you've done like so much to help other women. Sometimes I look at younger women and I think they do not know what it was like, 50 years ago. And you're one of the reasons that they don't know, which is actually a really good thing. So let's all give Susan a big hand just for everything she did.
Can I tell just one more quick story? When I was Commodore of the Hull Yacht Club, and there was a big tall ship thing going on in Boston Harbor, and I was wearing my Commodore's blazer with, the Commodore's patch on it. And there was some guys who had come in on one of the British tall ships, and this guy said to me, "You wearing your husband's blazer?" He said, that would never be allowed in anywhere in England. And I said, "I beg your pardon, this is my blazer." And couldn't believe it, just couldn't believe it, that I was Commodore of the Yacht Club. I like to joke about the fact that the club was in pretty bad shape back then. There were a lot of changes going on in the town itself, as well as sailing. And the club was close to going out, and there wasn't a guy in the club who wanted to be Commodore when it closed its doors. And I think I was the rear Commodore and ended up being Commodore overnight, because the then Commodore unfortunately died in office. And none of the guys wanted it. So anyhow.
Thank you for stepping up there, Susan. That's really, that's what women do. They step up and they fill a need, and we're so appreciative of everything that you did to help us go out there and enjoy the sport like we can now.
I sure had a good time. And still am.
I'm very grateful to you. We've got a couple of questions. One is do you still race? And if not, how old were you when you stopped? And the question about did you take your husband sailing? I think you already answered that one, but.
Well, he said when I was sitting on the beach one night watching the end of a twilight race, and the guy who was winning was one of my dear friends. I'd grown up sailing against him my whole life, and I said to my husband, he's got 4 kids too, and how come he's out there racing and I'm sitting on the beach? And Jim said, "Do you want a boat?" He said, "Sure I do. You know I do." He said, "All right, we'll get a boat, but one that you can race and we can day sail." And we got an Ensign, and that was great. And as long as the fleet lasted in our bay, and then as happens in the demographics change and the boats change, and I went from the Ensign to the 210. And I still have a 210, and on one of my grandson's 24th birthday, I gave him a birthday present. He is now half owner of 210 number 460.
Awesome. That question was from Heather Sloat, and we've got one from Jana, and her question is, how did the men receive you at races, Susan?
I need to be very honest. In all my years of sailing, in all the times I was the only girl there, the only woman there, and usually oftentimes the only female skipper. I can't think of any male who really disrespected me. And I think that says a lot for some of the guys, most of the guys, because nobody ever made fun of me or gave me a hard time or anything like that.
I think that's a testament to your spunk. Well, thank you, Susan. It's so nice to hear the historical, backside of sailing and has some history. History is really important for us to know how far we've come and where we want to go. I keep telling people that if women, if I really felt like women were already on a equal footing for sailing, then there would not be an NWSA. So thank you for making everything come together for younger women, and thank you, Susan.
I mean, I went to see Maiden, and some of the women on Maiden, did you see the movie Maiden? And if you haven't, go see it, please. But they were in college when I was coaching, and I was so excited to see some of them.